Well, I think this is maybe the most important thing to know about living right now in the 21st century, that we are now hackable animals. We have the technology to decipher how humans, or what you think, what you want, to predict human choices, to manipulate human desires in ways which were never possible before. Basically, to hack a human being, you need two things. You need a lot of data, especially biometric data. Not just about where you go and what you buy, but what is happening inside your body and inside your brain. And secondly, you need a lot of computing power to make sense of all that data. Now, previously in history, this was never possible. Nobody had enough data and enough computing power to hack human beings. Even if the KGB or the Gestapo followed you around 24 hours a day, eavesdropping on every conversation you had, watching everybody you meet, still they did not have the biological knowledge to really understand what's happening inside you, and they certainly didn't have the computing power necessary to make sense even of the data they were able to collect. So the KGB could not really understand you, could not really predict all your choices or manipulate all your desires and so forth. But now it's changing. What the KGB couldn't do, corporations and governments today are beginning to be able to do. And this is because of the merger of the revolution in biotech. We are getting better in understanding what's happening inside us, in the body, in the brain. And at the same time, the revolution in infotech, which gives us the computing power necessary. When you put the two together, when infotech merges with biotech, what you get is the ability to create algorithms that understand me better than I understand myself. And then these algorithms can not just predict my choices, but also manipulate my desires and basically sell me anything, whether it's a product or a politician.
And so that's what you're calling hacking, that you're hitting me with the right emotional message at exactly the right time based on my biometric data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of the things you can do. Again, you can predict, you can manipulate, you can eventually also re-engineer or replace. If you really hack a system, you really understand how it functions, then usually you can also re-engineer it, or you can completely replace it. And again, one of the dangers that we are facing today in the 21st century is that computers and AI would be able to replace humans in more and more tasks and maybe push millions of humans out of the job market as a result.
All right, so I fully understand the dangers, and we will talk about some of what we were talking about off camera, which is we've got this whole story called Neon Future where we're exploring that notion of what happens to what you've called the useless class when they're pushed out of the job market, and what does that do economically. But just staying with the notion of the hackability for a second. So it's funny, as you were describing it, and I know you bring this sense of like, there's some like real significant problems we need to take a very serious look at. And I get almost giddy with excitement because I have potentially delusional levels of optimism. I'm very open to that.
No, I agree. I mean, the thing about this ability to hack humans is that it has also potentially tremendous positive consequences. And this is why it's so tempting. If it was only bad, then it would have been like an easy deal to say, okay, we don't want that, and let's stop researching or going in that direction. But it is extremely tempting because it can provide us, for example, with the best healthcare in history, something which goes far beyond anything we've seen so far. This can mean that maybe in 30 years, the poorest person on the planet can get a better healthcare from her or his smartphone than the richest person today gets from the best hospitals and the best doctors. The kind of things you can just know about what's happening in your body is nothing like we've seen so far. Well, it's a very good example. I mean, the Stanford algorithm, actually there is a lot of problems with that research, and let's put it aside. But first key message from that is how little people actually know about themselves. And one of the most important things in my life, and also I think in my scientific career, was the realization of how little I know about myself and humans in general. There were so many important ideas and important facts we don't realize about ourselves. I was 21 when I finally realized that I was gay, which is, when you think about it, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, it should have been obvious at age, 16, 15. And an algorithm would have realized it very quickly. And you can build algorithms like that today or in a few years. You just need to follow your eye movements. Like you go on the beach, or you look at the computer screen and you see an attractive guy and an attractive girl, and just follow the focus of the eyes. Where do the eyes go and whom do they focus on? It should be very easy. And such an algorithm could have told when I was 15 that I was gay. And the implications are really mind-boggling when an algorithm knows such an important thing about you before you know it about yourself. Now, it can go in all kinds of directions. It really depends on where you live and what you do with it. In some countries, you can be in trouble now with the police and the government. You might be sent to some re-education facility. In some countries, like with surveillance capitalism, so maybe I don't know about myself that I'm gay, but Coca-Cola knows that I'm gay because they have these algorithms. And they want to know that because they need to know which commercials to show me. Let's say Coca-Cola knows that I'm gay, and I even know it about myself, that they know it, and Pepsi doesn't. Coca-Cola will show me a commercial with a shirtless guy drinking Coca-Cola, but Pepsi will make the mistake of showing a girl in a bikini. And next day, without my realizing why, when I go to the supermarket, when I go to the restaurant, I will order Coca-Cola, not Pepsi. I don't know why, but they know. So they might not even share this kind of information with me. Now, if the algorithm does share the information with me, again, a lot depends on context. One scenario is that you're 15 years old, you go to a birthday party of somebody from your class, and somebody just heard that there is this cool new algorithm which tells you your sexual orientation. And everybody agrees it will be a lot of fun to just have this game that everybody takes turn with the algorithm and everybody else looking and seeing the results. Would you like to discover about yourself in such a scenario? This can be quite a shocking experience. Okay, but even if it's done in complete privacy, it's a very deep philosophical question. What does it mean to discover something like that about yourself from an algorithm? What does it mean about human life, about human identity? We have very little experience with these kinds of things. From very ancient times, all the philosophers and saints and sages tell people to get to know yourself better. It's one of maybe the most important thing in life is to get to know yourself better. But for all of history, this was a process of self-exploration, which you did through things like meditation and maybe sports and maybe art and contemplation and all these things. What does it mean when the process of self-exploration is being outsourced to a big data algorithm? Again, the philosophical implications are quite mind-boggling. Something as simple as choosing music. So you were just dumped by your boyfriend or girlfriend, and the algorithm that controls the music that you listen to chooses the songs that are the best fit for your current mental state. And of course, this brings up the question of what is the metric? What do you actually want from the music? Do you want the music to uplift you? Or do you want the music to kind of connect you to the deepest level of sadness and depression? And ultimately, we can say that the algorithm can follow different kinds of instructions. If you know what kind of emotional state you want to be in, you can just tell the algorithm what you want and it will do it. If you're not sure, you can tell the algorithm, follow the recommendation of the best psychologist today. So let's say you have the 5 stages of grief. So, okay, walk me with music through these 5 stages of grief. And the algorithm can do that better than any human DJ. And what we really need to understand in this regard is that what music and most of art plays on, in the end, is the human biochemical system. At least according to the dominant view of art in the modern Western world. We had different views in different cultures, but in the modern Western world, the idea of art is that art is above all about inspiring human emotions. It doesn't necessarily have to be joy. Great art can inspire also sadness, can inspire anger, can inspire fear. It can be a whole palette of emotional states, but art is about inspiring human emotions. So the instrument artists play on, and whether it's musicians or poets or movie makers, they're actually playing on the Homo sapiens biochemical system. And we might reach a point quite soon when an algorithm knows this instrument better than any human artist. A movie or a poem or a song that will not move you, that will not inspire you, might inspire me. And something that will inspire me in one situation might not inspire me in another situation. And as time goes on and the algorithm gathers more and more data about me, it will become more and more accurate in reading my biochemical system and knowing how to play on it as if it was a piano. Like, okay, you want joy? Pfft, I press this button and out comes the perfect song, the only song in the world that can actually make me joyful right now. If there is like something seriously wrong in my body that I don't know about, like, I don't know, cancer or something, I would like the algorithm to find that out. I don't want to wait until, the usual process is that it has to go through your own mind. You can't outsource it. Today, when you need to diagnose cancer, there are exceptions, but in most cases, there is a crucial moment when you feel something is wrong in my body. And you go to this doctor and that doctor and you do this test and that test until they finally realize, okay, we just discovered you have cancer in your liver or whatever. But because it relies on your own feelings, in this case, feelings of pain, very often it's quite late in the process. By the time you start feeling pain, usually the cancer has spread. And maybe it's not too late, but it's going to be expensive and painful and problematic to treat it. But if we can, outsource this, don't go through the mind, through my feelings. I want an algorithm that with biometric sensors is monitoring my health 24 hours a day without my being aware of it. It can potentially discover this liver cancer when it is just a few cells are beginning to split and to spread. And it's so easy and cheap and painless to take care of it now, instead of 2 years later, when it's already spread and it's a big problem. So this is something that I think almost everybody would sign on to. And this is the big temptation, because it comes with the long tail of dangers. This algorithm, the healthcare system, knows almost everything about you. So one of the biggest battles in the 21st century is likely to be between privacy and health. And I guess that health is going to win. Most people will be willing to give up a very significant amount of privacy in exchange for far better healthcare. Now, we do need to try and enjoy both worlds to create a system that gives us a very good healthcare, but without compromising our privacy, yes, you can use the data to tell me that there is a problem and we should do this or that to solve it, but I don't want this data to be used for other purposes without my knowing it. Whether we can reach such a balance and have your cake and eat it too, that's a big political question. Yes, our identity is really just a story. which we constantly construct and embellish. I mean, you can say that the entire human mind is a machine that constantly produces stories, and especially one very important story, which is my story. And different people specialize in different genres. Some people build their story as a tragedy, some people build their story as a comedy or as a drama. But in the end, the self is a story and not a real thing. And on the one hand, with all the new technologies, you get better and better abilities to construct yourself. But already today, a lot of the work which previously was done in the brain and in the mind of constructing my identity, my story, has been outsourced to things like Facebook. That you build your Facebook account, and this is actually outsourcing it from the brain, and you are busy maybe for hours every day just building a story and becoming extremely attached to it and publicizing it to everybody. And you tend to make this fundamental mistake. You think this is really me. And
Why is that a mistake? I'm actually really curious.
First of all, if you take something like the profile that people create about themselves in Facebook or in Instagram, it should be obvious. It doesn't really reflect your actual existence, your actual reality, both inner reality and outer reality. Like the percentage of time you smile in your Instagram account is much bigger than the percentage of time you smile in real life. And you go on some vacation and you post the images from the vacation. So usually you're smiling in your swimming suit on the beach with your girlfriend and boyfriend holding this cocktail, and everything looks perfect and everybody's so envious. But actually you just had a nasty fight with your boyfriend 5 minutes ago, and then this is the image that everybody else is seeing and thinking, oh, they must have such wonderful time. And afterwards, like a year later or 2 years later, you look back and this is what you see. And you forget what was the actual experience like.
What is the role of truth in the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves?
Very little.
Do you think there should be more?
There should definitely be more.
And what would be the outcome if we were like, I'm really going to make sure that the story I tell myself is objectively true?
It's going to be very, very painful and difficult. I think it is worth the effort, but it's just very difficult. We constantly edit this story. Just like the news on TV are edited, and just like, it's a bit like making a movie. Like you watch the movie in the cinema and everything is so seamless. Like, yeah, this is the story, it flows. And then when you actually see how a movie is produced, this is insane. Like you have this tiny bit of a scene, you repeat it 50 times, and sometimes, you shoot this scene 2 comes after scene 1, but actually it was filmed long before that. So sometimes you film the breakup of the lovers before you film the first meeting, for all kinds of schedule reasons and locations. So the end result is completely seamless and perfect, but it is actually made up from all these tiny disconnected bits that have been, this is from here and this is from there, and we somehow glue it together and it looks good. And it's the same with the story of our life. It's all kinds of bits and pieces, and only when you tell it to yourself or to somebody else, it kind of makes sense. The cost of trying to stick with the reality as it is very, very high. It's very difficult, it demands a lot of effort, and it's often very painful because you have to acknowledge many things about yourself that you don't want to acknowledge them. People have this fantasy of, going to some retreat and just taking out a week or 2 from life to really observe inside, to really explore who am I? What is my authentic self? And they have this fantastic notion that I will be able to finally connect to my inner child, and I will discover my true vocation in life, and I will discover all these wonderful things about me. And when you actually do it, the first thing you usually encounter is all the things you don't want to know about yourself. There is a reason that you don't want to know them. I think it's worth the effort, but it's a very, very hard task. I think that ultimately it is worth the price. I mean, delusions come at a very high price also. And not just to yourself, but to people around you, to the world as a whole. I mean, ultimately, this leads to things like wars and like genocide and I come from Israel, I come from the Middle East, so I am surrounded by millions of people who are killing each other because of all kinds of fictional stories and delusions that they believe in. So sometimes it's an important defensive mechanism. It's very difficult to live just with the raw truth all the time. But the price of delusion and the price of not being able to tell the difference between fiction and reality, it adds up. And eventually it adds up to things like genocide and war. Now that's a very important question. It has little to do with immortality, because even without immortality, we are heading in that direction. Even if the lifespan remains as it is, 80 years, every 10 years, you have another big shock. I mean, one of the things many people don't realize about the AI revolution and the automation revolution, they imagine it as some kind of one-time event. We have the big AI revolution in 2025. You have all these truck drivers and taxi drivers and doctors and whatever losing their jobs. You have a few difficult years of adjustment. And then eventually you have the brave new world of AI with a new equilibrium. And this is an extremely unlikely scenario, because we are nowhere near the maximum potential of AI. The speed in which it develops is only likely to accelerate. So what we are really going to face is a cascade of ever bigger revolutions in the job market and in many other areas of life, relationships, politics, and so forth. So you have a big disruption in 2025. You have an even bigger disruption in 2035, an even bigger one in 2045, and so forth. And if you look, say, at the job market, so okay, you were a truck driver and they no longer need you, but there is new demand for yoga teachers. So you somehow reinvent yourself at age 40. I'm no longer a truck driver, now I'm a yoga teacher. It's very difficult, you somehow do it. 10 years later, no need of yoga teachers, thank you very much. We now have these amazing applications connected with biometric sensors to your body. They know exactly what you're doing with every tiny muscle. As you do this posture or that posture, no human yoga teacher can compete with that. You're out of job. You have to reinvent yourself again as a designer of virtual world games. And you do it somehow. But 10 years later, you have to do it again, because this too has now been automated. And even if you get support from the government and there is all these education for adult system, the really big question is, again, it's psychological. Do we as human beings have the mental stability and the emotional intelligence necessary to reinvent ourselves repeatedly? And, when you're 20, what you're doing is basically to reinvent yourself or to invent yourself for the first time. And it is very difficult. When you're 30, it's even more difficult, but you somehow do it. But when you get to be 40, 50, 60, it becomes more and more difficult. You have more to let go of. I've invested so much in building this career, this personality, these skills. To give it all up and start again from anew, it's so difficult. So I don't know whether we can do it. The first thing they should realize is that nobody really knows. Nobody really knows how the job market would look like in 2040. So they should be suspicious of all these kinds of advices by people who pretend that they know what the job market would need in 20 years. The best investment, I would say, is in emotional intelligence and in mental balance and these kinds of skills of how to keep changing throughout your life, how to keep learning throughout your life. Now, how do you learn that? That's very, very difficult. We don't have a college degree in mental flexibility. But these are the most important tools. So whatever you choose, you can go to law school, you can go to ballet school, but you should keep in mind that much of what I'm learning might be irrelevant in 20 or 30 years. So whatever else I'm doing, I should also invest in developing my emotional intelligence, my mental balance, my ability to keep changing and learning and reinventing throughout my life. So maybe to give an image or a metaphor, if in the past education was like building a stone house with very deep foundations, now I would say that education is more like constructing a tent that you can fold up and move to another location very quickly and easily. Our lives in the 21st century, more than anything else, are going to be new technologies, especially AI and biotechnology. And most people, their understanding of these technologies and their potential, for good or for bad, it really comes from science fiction. The political system so far has done an awful job in understanding and preparing us for these kinds of developments. There is almost no talk in the political arena about AI and biotechnology. The scientific community is, of course, very deeply engaged with it, but most people don't read articles in Science or Nature, and even if they tried, it would be very difficult for them to understand the professional jargon and all the statistics and so forth. So most people actually get their education about what's coming from science fiction. And this means, at least I think so, that science fiction is now the most important artistic genre, and it should also be the most responsible. And one of the problems with science fiction is that so far it has done a so-so job. Some novels and TV series and films are really amazing in the way they explore what could happen, ranging like some of my favorites are, my all-time favorite is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which was written back in the early 1930s, and I think is the most prophetic and profound. I want to bring more clarity to the public conversation on what's happening in the world. I think that too much of the public discussion is focused either on the wrong issues or is extremely confused and unclear. And people are flooded by enormous amounts of information which they don't know how to make sense of. And what I see my mission as bringing clarity to the public discussion, especially in terms of focusing people's attention on the most important questions. I try to give some answers too, but I don't care a lot if people don't agree with me about the answers, about the solutions. The important thing, I think, is to agree about the questions. And I would end by saying that there are three big challenges to humankind in the 21st century. There are nuclear war, climate change, and technological disruption. And these should be the first three items on the political agenda of every country. And this is not the case right now. I would like it to be the case.